Past the hour now, I think we can get started. So thank you all for being here today. My name is Tony Liu. I'm one of the co-founders of InsurTech NY, and I'll be your MC host for the day. Today, we're going to learn how you can set your core systems up so you're not going through gigantic core system upgrade projects every year, and how to automate claims process that can help an insurer lower their costs and improve customer experience. We hope it'll be an informative event for all of you, whether you're in analytics, claims, or any part of our IT department, or you just want to get better at understanding how this part of the insurance industry is evolving. We first want to thank all of our sponsors who have made this event possible today. Let me share a bit about them. Brightcore is a trusted, fully managed insurance platform for the P&C insurers. APN helps organizations build apps and workflows rapidly with a low-code automation platform. Avanta Ventures is a venture capital arm of CSAA Insurance Group, a AAA insurer, and they invest in early-stage opportunities. EY builds a better work world by providing trust through assurance and helping businesses grow, transform, and operate. And finally, Level exists to make your story a success, whether you're reinventing your company or creating an industry-changing product. Thank you again to all of today's event sponsors. For some of you who are new to our event today, we do a number of things to help the InsurTech ecosystem in New York and beyond. We do this by providing innovation educational events throughout the year and opportunity to promote the best startups in the world through our accelerator and competition. Our next public event is on October 21st, and it will be focused on building new digital distribution channels. This will be our first in-person public event in New York since the pandemic has started, and so hope to see many of you in person finally. The event is we have expanded the event, so it's now going to be a half-day event. We're also very busy with our 2021 Startup Accelerator program, which will get started next month. We have already finished accepting applications for this year's cohort, however, but our annual early stage competition is coming up soon, and applications for this will open in January. So if you're a startup in your early stage, watch out for information that will be coming up in the next few months. And final announcement before we get to the agenda. Save the date, March 14th, 2022. We're hosting our third annual Sprint Conference, this time in person in New York. This will be an all-day event with approximately 500 insurance influencers attending. There will be expos, speakers, food, and drinks. You should not miss this event, so please save the date, March 14th, 2022. More information will be shared in the coming weeks and months. All right, so let's get to the agenda today. We'll first start with our TED Talk and the first panel, where we'll learn more about the future of claims process and core system upgrades. And then we'll hear from a hot digital MGA InsurTech on steps they take to find the best core system vendor. Then we'll hear more on how to speed their claims process using automation. Following the speaking sessions, we're going to engage in an exciting speed networking game, which I'll talk about more in a bit. Really excited to try this out. So don't leave after the presentation sessions are over. There will be at least 1 hour networking after the presentations at 3 p.m. Great. So now let's get started with the amazing speakers we have lined up today. Team, if you want to bring Aaron up to the stage, it'll be great. Our first speaker is Aaron Herman, who is the product owner of claims at Brightcore. He has 20 years of experience in building and marketing customer-centric software to insurance carriers and brokers. Prior to Brightcore, he has held senior roles in Majesco and InsurTech. Aaron will talk about ecosystems, emerging technologies, and the future of claims. Take it away, Aaron.
Okay, very good. Hopefully you can see my screen. It is an absolute pleasure to visit with everybody today, and I'm hoping that we get some value out of this very quick discussion we're going to have. I have served in the industry for quite a long time in a variety of roles, I've had the opportunity to help organizations, including carriers, TPAs, MGAs, self-insureds, et cetera, move out of their legacy systems and modernize. And as I mentioned, it's served in a lot of different roles. I'm enjoying what I'm doing today in helping Brightcore build out a brand new claim system. Some of the key questions I want to review today and go through would be how core claim systems have evolved over the last 25 years. What are attributes and benefits of those modern core systems? And of course, what does the future look like, and provide a potential solution for that? Now, in this, we want to go on a little bit of a journey and go through some history. And a lot of this is actually history that I myself have gone through personally. If you go back in the 80s, these systems were the systems that were in the insurance industry were dominated primarily by mainframe and mini mainframe systems. These were characterized by green screens. There was character-based screens. Some of you may remember things like 5250 and 3270 emulation. These also had flat file structures. There was complex and deep menu structures that these systems had. In fact, the very first system that I worked on had 15 menus deep. I got so frustrated trying to figure out where things were, I one day just printed them all out, put them on a board, and memorized where everything was in that system. But these systems did not have relational databases. They were very heavily dependent on paper processes and were primarily used just for accounting. Now, over time, as time marched on, these systems really gave way to the mainframe, gave way to mini mainframe, then eventually moved over to client server. But there's a lot of those mainframe systems still in the marketplace today, and their life was extended because of these new solutions that came out in the client server world initially, such as notes, task, document creation, document storage, email, all the things that the mainframe could not do at the time. Of course, navigation was improved. We introduced the mouse. Workflow improved by having windows that could pop up. And eventually new systems were developed altogether that included all of these things and accounting. Now these systems, this new breed of systems, then eventually evolved again into browser-based systems, to offsite or hosted systems, to cloud, and now into cloud native. And some of the big improvements that occurred over this period of time was this idea of anywhere, anytime processing, 24/7 access to the system, improved file storage, data protection, and of course, things like high performance processing. And a lot of these things were enabled because we moved that box off-site and had vendors manage that updated the operating systems and drivers and managed the integration between disparate platforms. All of those things that they were good at and we were not as an insurance company. Now, with these changes came a lot of benefits to this new breed of applications that's evolving that are cloud native. And some of these things are unmatched scalability during CAT season. Such things as if you have an organization that has normally 5 adjusters, you want to scale it up to 50 adjusters. You don't want to have to pay for that excess capacity of having 50 adjusters. The cloud allows you to be able to do that very rapidly. Speed to market is impacted by the fact that cloud-based environments and cloud-native environments, you can replicate a new environment for production or for testing very rapidly, and sometimes in just a few hours. And also the movement of pre-built content or configuration of that content from a UAT to a production environment. All these things make it so much easier in a cloud-native environment. And of course, I think the biggest one of all in the cloud-native is the ability for a vendor to have one master code base and replicate that code base out to all of the client sites, keeping the systems up to date all the time. This means that you as a client never have to apply updates to the system never ages, you never get stuck in an old version of a system, and the system never becomes a legacy system to you. Now, the additional improvements from a cloud native perspective on claims processing include things like better navigation. The systems are designed now to focus more on user experience and not focus on engineering limitations. Client configurable business rules can be put in place. The APIs have matured a lot, and APIs now are in such a way where you could have a client using a user interface. They could be interacting with your system, interacting also with a third-party system through these APIs, and the end user thinks that they're just in one system. And so there's a lot of things we can do there now. Event messengers allowed us to be able to do asynchronous computing if you don't need real-time interaction with another system. And then, of course, lastly, we have the idea of a headless solution. Clients can actually create their own mobile apps and those types of things and interact with a vendor solution that is mature on the back end using this API infrastructure that allows you to be able to do that. So all of these things have evolved, and alongside the evolution of claim systems have been other networks and other environments. Auto damage estimate and repair networks have evolved over time. Property damage estimation, third-party adjuster networks, and of course the Amazon shopping experience has changed how everybody thinks about computing and how we interact with systems as a whole, especially on the web. Also, alongside of these things, technologies have evolved, such as personal mobile devices, phones and cameras, video, internet, geo-tracking, wearables that monitor heart activity, temperature, blood pressure, Internet of Things. We have now water leakage, freeze detection, and those types of things all accessible through devices. Drones can provide eyes on sites that adjusters currently couldn't get to because of safety and security. And then, of course, machine learning. There's 1,000 applications here, including workflow, triage, assignment, fraud detection, automated straight-through processing, and so much more. This has actually created, all of these things together have created what we call the InsurTech explosion. There are new technologies are being invented, existing technologies being brought in from outside of our industry or being brought into insurance. The InsurTech conferences showcase many vendors with wonderful value propositions that have the potential to improve customer service experience, reduce costs, and the possibilities are endless. These new technologies allow us to create optimized workflows between carriers and third-party vendors, reducing turn time, increasing customer satisfaction, creating more accuracy, predictability, and decision-making, and reducing leakage caused by human error. All of these things together really have evolved to create this need for the next evolution in claims computing, which is the ability to have real-time integrated workflow between multiple vendor platforms. So is there a case to upgrade your legacy system? Of course, absolutely. However, oftentimes these new technologies can connect with your existing environments too. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Now, if we look at the convergence of all of these things coming together, somebody might sit back and say, what do we do? If you're a VP of claims or a head of operations, you might say, how do we improve? How do we adapt some of these things? What should be our focus? Where do we start? Well, there's 3 things that I would recommend that you do no matter what project that you embark on. And that is, one is to keep the key focus of whatever you try to do to make sure that your claim system remains the hub of claims activity. This will simplify what the adjusters do, keeping the adjusters as much as possible in that claim system, presenting them with information that they need to make the decisions that they need in real time. Another would be making sure that the adjusters don't have to rekey data. That's a place where a lot of the mistakes happen. And then lastly would be to make sure that we automate workflow as much as makes sense, assisting adjusters in their decision processing. When should the machine make a decision? When should a human make a decision? And also automate the communication between the insured and the claimant. All of these things create lots of benefits, including simplifying how adjusters work, consistency in data processes, reducing errors, all of these things ultimately coming down to lowering costs. So what I want to provide for you next is just a completely hypothetical scenario of what it might look like if you are going to deploy some of these technologies. And let's show you what will happen. Now, I have to start and preface as I get this set up that I'm using some vendors in here as names. These are not paid sponsorships, and they're examples only. Also, you have to forgive me for some of my graphics because, well, you'll see. So what happens then is we have an accident occurs, and when an accident occurs, an F&O process needs to be set up if we're talking about personal auto insurance. Oftentimes, the insured will call their agent, or the insured, if there's a different relationship, may call the insurance carrier directly. When they call the insurance carrier, they'll often be routed right into an F&OL intake artist, a first signs of loss intake artist, and we'll talk about more about that person in just a minute. Now, becoming more popular, these days is also submitting the accident online through a mobile app. You can take pictures, have geo-tracking information can be collected from that. That claim would then be submitted into a queue, and very rapidly that would be routed to an FNOL intake artist, which would call the person back and begin interviewing and finding out what is going on. Now, what we can deploy is we can deploy new technology, which is reflexive questioning technology that allows us to be able to ask questions, and then depending on the answer, have additional questions pop up. Questions about the injury may give way to asking more questions about, is an ambulance needed, depending on the severity of the injury. You may need more than one ambulance. We also may need to deploy other on-site services, such as fire department or the news. Well, I guess the news are really going to show up by themselves anyway on a big accident. But other questions coming out of what's collected from the photographs would be the body damage. And you also find out, when we collect those things, about the severity of that body damage. If it looks like it's severe, you may ask the claimant if they want to have a tow and have the vehicle picked up and sent somewhere. If the vehicle is going to be sent somewhere, oftentimes there's questions about, is a rental car needed? Does the person actually need to have a lift from where they are at the site of the location or otherwise? Also, when we set up the rental, we could have a button set up on the system that automatically pushes information out to Avis or Enterprise or other networks to do that. Now, for rental cars needed, you may want to consider, for cost purposes, potentially opening up an Uber account for the person, pushing up credits to Uber, and then having the vehicle sent to the site of where the person wants that to go. This would be a big advantage because oftentimes those rental cars just sit in driveways and parking lots anyway. Now, all these things can happen during the FNOL process and more. If we're going to also tow, we need to decide where is that tow, where is the vehicle going to go? Is it going to go to a body shop? Is it going to go to a salvage yard? All of these decisions have to be made. Some of them are made prior to the claim being submitted, during that FNOL process, or afterwards. Once the claim is submitted, workflow rules can then kick off. Automated intelligence or just smart business rules can be deployed to decide the adjuster assignment based on caseload and specialty. Also, photographs can be submitted to vendors such as companies like Snapsheet for appraisals. They have the ability to be able to, based on the photograph, what the damage is. If it's severe damage, we could have an automated intelligence within the claim system itself, determine that severity based on the estimate coming back. If it's low severity, the AI could say, if there's no medical involved, the AI may make a decision to automatically settle that claim. Reserves can be set automatically based on those rules and the AI. Submission for payment can happen automatically, and then that can be sent out to an event manager. And asynchronously, we could have payment vendors attached to that. Now, this is a complex process. And so if the AI determines it's a higher severity, the next question is it repairable or not? If it's determined that it's potentially repairable, a tear down estimate may need to happen. We may want to authorize the body shop to begin tearing it down to see if there's any additional damage. During that process, we may decide to have a network such as Mitchell, Autotext, or CCC automatically submit something into a record or claim into their environments, and that kick off the process on their side for the repair. Repair estimates can come back into the system based on the value of that repair estimate. If it's 75% or more of the value of the vehicle, an automated decision may be made by AI to salvage the vehicle, and a record could be sent out to Copart and automatically kick off that auction process. Another thing that can happen, because it's so interactive at the body repair shop level, is additional supplements may actually be created as the vehicle begins to be repaired. Additional damage may be discovered. Those repair estimates can be submitted back automatically into the claim system. The claim system can either decide through an AI, or a human being can decide whether or not that invoice should be paid. Again, those events can be sent into the event manager, and issuance of a payment be made through one of the vendors that are set up on the system to do that. So this, again, is just a hypothetical scenario of what might occur, and some of the technologies that are available today to be able to allow that to happen. So I hope you have a wonderful show today. This should give you a good idea of some of the things possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron, for sharing such a thorough, creative process, that workflow diagram. We haven't had that type of diagram be used in a presentation, so thanks for trying that. That was awesome. Great to see how it can be automated. All right, well, next up is our panel, and it's going to be a panel of keeping core systems current using Agile approach. Let me first introduce the speakers. Teams, you can bring them up to the stage. I appreciate it. Owen Williams is the SVP of Global Business Systems at Everest Insurance. Owen was a winner of the Novarica Impact and Silent Model Carrier Award. And he has held senior IT roles at Hamilton Insurance, Tokyo Marine, and Chubb. Todd Pugh leads commercial IT applications at Mobilitas Insurance, a subsidiary of CSAA Insurance Group. Todd is a patent holder for system underwriting, prepackaged BOP policies, and he has held senior leadership roles in commercial insurance at Liberty and Safeco. Brett Luntz is the CIO of CopperPoint Insurance. He has led IT projects across the spectrum, including new policy admin systems, workflow reengineering, and post-acquisition integrations. He also has held senior IT roles at Cal Dental, Nautilus Insurance, and Liberty. Our moderator for the panel is Roy Hansraj, who is a principal at InsurTech NY and the lead of RCI, an advisory firm focused on helping insurers with digital transformation. Roy previously had business transformation at MetLife and QBE. Roy, the panel is yours.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, and great to be at another InsurTech New York event. I'm excited to kick off the first panel. Welcome, Owen, Todd, and Brad. Let's jump right into it. In these unique times, keeping core systems current is pretty demanding, and that balance is very interesting. Todd, you know, at Mobilitas, it's a relatively new platform compared to the rest of the CSA products. How do you balance the demands of expanding functionality with the needs of a robust core system?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You know, when I first start to think about this, I think about prioritization, but I think we all know there's a lot more opportunities and complexities that go into that. We knew very early on in our journey that we would have a lot of demand and we wanted the ability to get to the market quickly. So one of the things that we did is we really took a pause, a step back, and we asked a series of questions and things like, how can we simplify our technology environment, particularly being a startup? How can we modernize right out the gate? How do we sustain agility? And when I think about agility, I think of three things: speed, flexibility, as well as the ability to scale. And then we looked at really three things based off that. One is our underlying infrastructure. How can we automate and scale leveraging things like native cloud? That's really been the core when we think about a modern platform and our ability to scale and really think about quality as well as speed. Second, we also think about where does it make sense to buy or rent instead of build, and use things like software as a service. So that gives us speed, but we can also focus our resources on the most complex capabilities. And then finally, we look at opportunities that we can reuse technologies. Now that could be something like microservices outside of our core application, or it could be reusing existing capabilities across our enterprise. And it's really the combination of these things that have allowed us to harmonize the demands to be able to deliver with speed and work on efforts simultaneously.
You know, it's kind of interesting you're saying about speed and all these services and these new data sources, especially in workers' comp, talking about third party, the whole digital, you know, world. They're putting a lot of demand on the core systems right now, and it wasn't that case before. So Brad and Owen, I'm gonna pick on you guys and ask, you know, do you think where you guys are with your companies and the core systems, are they ready for future expansions?
Sure, Ryan, I can jump in first. So, yeah, when we, think about third-party data that's out there, I mean, it's expanding every day. So as we looked at that and we looked to address these kind of opportunities, we started several months ago moving to more of an API-led connectivity model for our enterprise architecture. And really this allowed us to package these data services as reusable components and really then orchestrate the services across and make building blocks out of them. Right, and in this way, the new sources, we can experiment with them in predictive models. We can experiment with them in ways to augment data that's coming into the environment, reducing keystrokes, those kinds of things, and do this outside of the core system so that you're not constantly in trying to figure out how do I customize and over-configure your core systems, and really it allows us to be more nimble when we're trying to take advantage of some of these new capabilities as you're really figuring out what they mean to the environment.
Yeah, I basically echo some of the same comments that Brad has. I think from my standpoint, the systems really can support a lot of different integration methods for connecting in third-party data or other type of transactional content. But I think that the conversation is lost a little bit when that's the focus, right? My view is that the conversation really needs to shift to how you're using this information in the context of the insurance value chain. Right. More often than not, I have a lot of conversations with folks say, "Oh, I have this third-party data source, I want to connect it in," but it's not really clear to me what it means for the adjuster in the life cycle as they're adjusting a claim, or the underwriter in the underwriting context. And I think that's really where the conversation needs to start. And then you start talking about, okay, this is the integration approach I'm going to take, and ultimately how it's going to get surfaced and manifested for an underwriter or claim adjuster.
No, that's ideal, actually, Owen. I think that's looking at the beginning of the whole process and understanding where it comes from is key. And when we talk about where it starts, right? Different for a reinsurance group than it is for an insurance carrier. And do insurers that serve multiple types of segments of the value chain need to look at those core systems differently?
Yeah, I think fundamentally the systems need to be fit for purpose, right? Okay. If you look at the insurance space, just in general, it tends to be a much more transactional heavy business segment relative to a reinsurer, right? There's just a lot of system needs. There's a lot of regulatory needs that are state specific, and the system requirements tend to be very heavy. And it's heaviest, I would say, mostly in the personal line segment, right? As you move through mid-market commercial, large commercial, it's a little bit different. If you look at the reinsurance side of things, yes, they have a lot less transactions, but those transactions tend to have a lot of complex financial structures, right, that need to be reported. And so the systems are very, very different. And I think you need a different approach for that. I think, you've had vendor entrants in the marketplace trying to create one platform for reinsurance and insurance. I don't think that's largely successful because of the things I noted earlier. So my view on it is you really want to have the platforms fit for purpose, and aligned to really ultimately what the business strategy of the company is, right? If it's a heavily ISO-based carrier, you're going to think about a different platform differently than one that's more specialty lines.
No, that's key. And I'm gonna switch the conversation a little bit, because exactly what you're talking about, Owen. If you look in the perspective a little differently, you can't make all the users happy all the time. Like, I can't really make my family happy. But in terms of stakeholder management, is it difficult when a core system has a diverse set of users? How does Todd? I'm gonna poke at you with the CSAA prioritize those new features, the developments, stability, and the maintenance across those systems. What's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, great question. It really does take a balanced approach. Now, that doesn't mean a series of compromises. You want to make sure that you're always focused on the most important thing. We really established a framework of what I would call 4 guiding principles. One is that as a team, really a cross-functional team across the insurance value stream, work from a single backlog based off business priorities. And that really then creates alignment and decision velocity and transparency in everything that we do. Now, that initially starts with strategic initiatives, and in most cases, we aspire to have those assigned or aligned with a financial metric. So we really can be aligned on what is the desired business outcome, and we can focus on where we think we have the greatest business opportunity. Third, teams also are organized to achieve business outcomes. So for all of us that have been around in the industry for a while, traditionally we've seen teams maybe organized around applications. Part of the future, and as we look at modernizing how we deliver, it's really focused around organizing teams and skills and abilities around those business outcomes. And then as part of our planning and delivering, and I think this is something that's been really important, is including capacity for technical enablers, technology debt. That gets to that product stability and maintenance, as well as innovation, things like test and learn. So we really bake that into our overall cadence and part of our operating model. It allows for the decision velocity. Not everything's a trade-off. At the same time, we can take on multiple efforts within reason, and it really empowers the team to do the right thing when they're thinking about how to continue to improve the system, whether it be performance related, security related, or customer centric related.
Now, I think you phrased it pretty well, because when you look at that business viewpoint and where they want to go, what the outcome is, some of it is growth, right? And looking at that from a growth model, Brad, CopperPoint has grown over the past few years via those acquisitions, right? So when that happens, that growth and aligning the business is a different kind of animal. And I think you guys acquired Alaska National. What's your policy on that integration, maintaining all those systems getting together, those core systems? And is there a goal to get to everyone on one system?
Yeah, we've definitely, we've had a couple of acquisitions, and that continues to be, part of our overall business strategy is acquisition. But the goal is certainly more, how do you bring the most value out of an acquisition? When you step into an acquisition, you typically get new products, new markets, and new internal capabilities as a part of the acquisition. Alaska National is a good example where prior to that, CopperPoint had no large loss sensitive internal capabilities. And so that comes with the acquisition and really enhances the overall value of the enterprise. So while our enterprise strategy is to leverage shared services models, drive efficiency, we don't want to do that at the expense of destroying the value of the acquisition, right? So we step into the acquisition and really intentionally, thoughtfully kind of walk through a process to look at what systems does the acquired company have, what systems do we have, what's the right platform. We do try, the ultimate goal is to try to get to a common set of platforms, right? Just from a cost efficiency and agility, right? If you have 5 platforms for the same type of function, you're just not going to be able to move as quickly. So that is what we try to step into, but we do it very intentionally rather than just saying, oh, we acquired you and guess what, we're on platform XYZ, so you're moving over. You have to really look at that as, well, what capabilities does that acquired company have? How do we accommodate those in the platform we have? Or is it time to look at a platform the acquired company had, and maybe that's a better platform for the enterprise, right? And we shift the other direction. So the other thing is we leverage the enterprise data warehouse and our enterprise service bus as a way to quickly integrate systems and get a view of the enterprise data so that you don't have to rush through the integration so quickly. If you can get an enterprise view of your data, you can do things like integrate an acquired policy system into an enterprise billing system. You can present a common bill to your policy holders. You can get a common policyholder portal and view, so you can look like you're integrated while you work through some of the integrations in the back end. So.
No, that's key to make it the bus move forward and the planning in terms of setting expectations, if you will. Owen, I'm going to pick on you because looking at managing expectations is a challenge, and when you work with external teams, ensuring that partnership works together. What's your viewpoint on that? How do you manage that?
Sure. So I think what's really important is really aligning everybody to a common purpose and vision, right? I think fundamentally where a lot of this breaks down is when all parties, internal parties and external parties, aren't really clear as to what you're trying to do. And so that's kind of the first thing. I think secondarily, I mean, and again, when I talk about external parties, I'm thinking more of system integrators and vendors in our ecosystem, right? So when I think about those companies, firms, and individuals, they really have to understand the culture of the organization, and you have to make sure that you actually engage with a party that fits to your culture, right? One system integrator partner may work at one firm and doesn't work at all one for a variety of reasons, right? Communication styles, the way things are being managed, the way things are integrated. But what's important is that once you have determined who that strong partner network is, that you really pull them into the fold of the organization. And what I mean by that is, they start working side by side with your team to the point in which it becomes seamless in terms of how things are done, right? More often than not, when projects do fail in large programs, is when there's a slight disconnect between vendor partners and the internal team who's ultimately responsible for the delivery.
No, that totally makes sense, and I think that aligning everybody is usually one of those unsaid things that we all need to do when pulling this together. I'm gonna shift our conversation to, once we do have the alignment, what does the end goal look like? What does an agile practice look like? And Todd and Brad, I'm sure you guys have experiences in how do you organize the people and process to support that agility? And can you share what you've done to apply that interactive development in that model?
Yeah, Brad, I can jump in here. Really important question. And I think it starts with really having that diverse and blended team across the insurance value chain. It's represented across a number of roles. I think the three that are really critical is the business owner, the product owners, and the architects. Doesn't stop there, but it's really that shift left, right? The more that nucleus of that team is really its culture, creating that growth mindset and thinking curiously, thinking about the customer, really all of the things that need to be considered to be able to plan for the work. And then I think it comes down to three things: practice a lean product development mindset where you're thinking about minimal viable product, engage customers early and often, take a test and learn approach, right? How many times have we walked into an initiative, we think we're going to get A, the result is B. And we personally experienced a lot of benefits where we're seeing the speed and responsiveness of getting to market early, customers becoming champions because we're getting that real input along the way, and even a little less rework that ultimately brings efficiency or lowers cost and ultimately creates the business value that we're all trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think I would just add a couple of things. Our experience is very similar. So we organize the teams around what I would call product teams, and Todd, kind of described it the same way. For us, what's really important is those product teams are aligned to business outcomes, right? So it's not that, oh, I'm an IT person, oh, I'm an underwriter. It's, hey, look, we're as a team, we have business outcomes, and we're all measured on those outcomes, and that really helps drive the alignment. And then, as Todd touched on, it's about trying to make sure you have the right team members as a part of that team. And there's always, the tricky part for us as we've worked through our DevOps journey is how you flex people into the team. There's, people with specific skills, around security and architecture and infrastructure, and they're never going to be full-time on that team. So how do you flex them in, but still build that ownership? But I think, having that ownership, building the trust. Todd touched on the MVP thought, and that's key to getting deliverables out quickly. But if you don't have trust, you have difficulty with a minimum viable product, right? Because everybody goes, oh, this is my one shot to get something out, so I'm going to put everything in the kitchen sink in there, and all of a sudden now it's a 2-year project. Versus if you have trust that let's build something, let's test, learn, and there will be time to react. We are committed as a team to continuous improvement. If you can get that trust, then I think you can really drive towards those MVP products. So.
No, very key. I think looking at people, process, technology, all the companies look at that and getting to work together. to be agile? That's the $1 million consultant question, right? So keeps me employed. The other part of this is we're looking at looking at the agile methodology for system enhancements or features across the lines of business. What does Everest do about that viewpoint? Do they use the agile methodology or?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we have sprint teams formed and execute a lot of projects on that context, right? And it, I think like peers here have had some strong success there, but I think some of the things that both Brad and Todd reiterated around, there's some key roles that really need to understand the role and also take ownership over the project. Product owner is really critical. The business owner is really critical, and really having a common sense of purpose, right? That being said, I mean, we have found some projects where if I'm just upgrading a database from A to B, I'm not going to do that in an agile context, right? That's just a straight project plan, later project plan, I'll get it done, right? I think a lot of the projects and programs that we have where we're really trying to deliver incremental value from a software perspective, we tend to align those things as agile delivery projects. But the basic upgrades, or if I have to do something where I'm just lifting and shifting something from point A to point B, we're not going to use an agile methodology for executing.
No, that's key. And working with, I'm going to go out of our realm here. And a lot of the carriers who are stuck in I would say, a waterfall methodology, or with a team that's about 80% offshore, what steps do they need to take to get them over to agile? Owen or Todd, I'm going to throw that at you just to get your thoughts.
In terms of the offshore teams?
They're stuck on there.
I think, again, it goes back to my very early comments, right, about you need to make sure that your external parties or your vendor partners are aligned with how you want to do work, and that they're a cultural fit, right? I've not really run into a lot of vendor partners where I've said, look, we want to now deliver an agile context, and they're like, no way, right? What I've run into is, okay, yeah, we want to do that, and okay, let's talk about how we're going to achieve that, right? Because you hear some natural barriers that people put up, which I think are somewhat specious at best. They say, oh, the time zone. I'm like, come on, there's solvable things around it. Or, it's hard to kind of keep the daily stand-up meetings. Well, you can meet in the mornings, right? There's a lot of ways to work through that. And I think, but people need to take a step back and say, what are we trying to achieve, right? We're trying to achieve incremental value at a scale and at a pace that's faster than others, right? And if you think about that, then people will find ways to structure teams and execute very well on that.
Right. No.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I'm maybe going to oversimplify. So I'm thinking, number one, you're on the team, right? So just going with that mindset that everyone has a role to play and a certain level of accountability. And then even, we're going through this now that we're technically in about our second to third year journey. What is our operating model? What are our working agreements? Right? How do we want to shake hands and do the things that we've talked about this morning? So it really, I think, is a great way to level set and set those priorities, and then write it down and commit to it, making it part of your culture, part of your philosophy and your guiding principles for how you want to incrementally deliver and add business value.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that's really key. Brad, from your standpoint, you with your acquisitions, you're required to get everybody in a standard workflow or process. Do they keep on there? What's your vision on this and how you get them on there? I'd love to hear your position on it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, from a standard process perspective, I think, you find most of the time when you strip away a lot of things, we're doing things very similarly at the core, right? So I always start from where are we more similar, and then let's work from there. The companies that we've had acquisitions with lately have had agile practices. So we look at that and we say, what's working well there? How do we work? What could we learn? How do we tailor that? ultimately, you do want to try to get to a common practice just so that our business partners know what to expect and how we engage and work. And to the extent that you have a common business practice or a common process, you can optimize that, right? And as we learn as an organization, you improve those processes. If everybody's off doing kind of their own thing, you don't get that shared knowledge. So, but I always kind of start from the core of, we're not that dissimilar. There's usually common threads. Most companies, when you talk to them, they're on some sort of agile journey. It's just everybody tends to be in a different spot. And so, where is everybody, and then how do we kind of get to a common place?
Very true, very true. I think, when we do these, I'll say these movements to these business outcomes and goals, Todd, I'm going back to your point, because I think, business always have a timeline, right? They always want to know how long is it going to take. What is your typical cycle times in these development processes, and how do you keep the right people involved, the business owners?
Was that question for me?
That's you, Todd. I'm so sorry if I'm
Yeah,
lagging.
no, I got it. The audio cut out there for a minute. Yeah, no, great question. When we think about, kind of goes back to the first area that we talked about around what are the things and infrastructure and capabilities that we want to establish for ourselves. So very early on, we wanted to put into place where we could do daily builds, automated testing. We have a vision for full on-demand release capabilities. Currently, we're on a monthly release cycle. We're doing sprints every 2 weeks. One of the things that we're constantly looking at, and we're focused on, we constantly look at what's our lead time for delivery. And, I'm sure a lot of folks are going, wait a minute, how did you get that started, right? And putting those metrics in place, that can be a little bit scary. And you start to get lots of questions from team members. Wait a minute, what are we doing with these metrics? And here's what we talk about as a leadership team. It's all about growth mindset, continuous improvement. We want to focus on the trend. How are we helping the teams get a little bit better in regards to the speed, the quality, the value that we're creating? And it's all centered around that delivery lead time and how we can get more improvement and more throughput with our teams.
That's a great way to start the conversation. So it's encompassing and bringing them along on the journey. Hey, I have one question for all of you guys. So as we wrap up, I want to get some of the questions in the chat here that seem interesting. Actually, I've been looking at them. But before I leave there, this is the common InsurTech. Let's wrap up the session. So to get to those, question is, I want to hear from all you guys. What one suggestion do you have for this audience? How to make core systems enhancements or features more agile to incrementally reduce the risk? I'll start with you, Brad, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. I think the one thing that I would say is, over my career, I've learned try not to customize the core, right? And just keep it out of the box. And so most core systems today have a really nice API, an ability to interface in. And so do your experimentation, your build outside of the core and interface it in, and that just will allow you to be more nimble, more agile as you work through it.
Okay.
I'll jump on there. I'm going to add to what Brad said. I think also, where and how do you want to differentiate? Yeah. Right? And then think about that. Back 10 years ago, it was all about product differentiation. Mm-hmm. And that meant, okay, how do we navigate the core and the complexities of that, as Brad mentioned? Now I think today it's more about what's the customer experience, particularly as we have more capabilities and we think about what that digital experience is and that seamless experience. And now through APIs, native cloud, microservices, there are a lot of tools, I think, that can become part of the toolbox that help us do that in a very innovative way, but we can also test and learn. And I think one of the things, I don't know if we've talked a lot about, as part of that culture that we're focused on creating, it's the ability to pivot. It's okay to say, hey, you know what? We have a different opportunity here. Let's make a pivot and try this new opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, I think you have to realize and embrace, and I think it's really what Brad probably touched on, is that you're not competing with the core system. The core system is not a source of competitive advantage. And if you think it is, then you may be better off selling software rather than implementing. Because it really is. What's a source of competitive advantage? The things that you put around it and build around it. Whether it's your warehousing capability from a data perspective, your predictive models, your digital experience you're going to provide, your APIs, and so on, right? So with that mindset, it kind of leads you to a point: is okay, what is the minimum viable product set solution I need to have for a core system, and then build everything around it. I think the other thing to really think about or is to make sure that the business owner really is that arbiter can make a quick decision on things, right? I think more often than not, what happens in these core systems build out is that you have a lot of different stakeholders that essentially have a lot of decision rights, and there's no clear pathing as to who's going to make the final call to get things moving forward. And you end up burning off a lot of time and effort because a lot of times the delivery teams need quick answers on things. And, if people think, oh, 2 days is okay, 2 days is not okay when you're trying to deliver something fast. We need an answer today, and I think there needs to be a shift in the mindset of institutions and organizations as they're pursuing these core system build out to really align around that.
No, that's key. It goes back to the whole timing of this, and I like your structuring of that. It ideally lines up with what the engagement would look like and getting. Well, is it core systems? No, what are we trying to achieve here? So I like the way you approached it. There's a couple questions in here. We have some time. I'm gonna try to rattle them off and ask any three of you to jump in. One of the questions is, what will you recommend to concentrate on for the startups that build core systems for insurance companies?
Like I said, for the startups, I think they have to realize that they may have to take a niche approach in terms of how they want to position their product. I think more often than not, when I talk to a lot of startups, they're like, oh, well, my solution is going to solve this big complex problem that I have. And I'm like, well, how many customers do you have running this? And the answer is 0. Then it's really hard for me to take a leap of faith, right? Mm-hmm. So I think really having some kind of niche that you're focused on that solves a problem end to end makes a lot of sense. It's very, very difficult to I think sell, to me anyway, a solution that is unproven. I almost never want to be the first person out the door on some of this stuff. And I think secondarily is you have to be able to answer the question, how are you going to scale, right? Do you have strategic partners in your ecosystem, and there are tons of them, SI vendors, that will help you with implementation? Because more often than not, what happens is that the firms are very good, but if they have 10 customers, they don't have enough people to support 10 customers. They have enough people to support 1 customer or 3, and so those are some of the things I would strongly recommend.
Yeah, I would probably just add to that. I think where Owen started, first answer the question, what's the problem you're trying to solve, right? I mean, if it's just one more core system, there's plenty of those out there, right? So what's going to be different? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And maybe focusing more on that, then it starts to have a more interesting conversation.
No, that's ideal. That's very true. Back to our core of our guiding principle here of this conversation. Which type of, I'm going to the next question. Which type of products are insurers most willing to become agile MVPs in place of legacy as supplemental to legacy systems? Oh, that's interesting. That's good.
What type of products? I guess what would be interesting to me is if somebody was solving something in like the data space, or in the submission intake space, or in the predictive modeling space, right? Those are things that they're impactful enough that because there's a problem around those things that can be attacked, but it isn't kind of ripping out the core, right? And so those things are kind of interesting, So and I think I think earlier somebody talked about Snapsheet. I think that's an interesting journey to model on, right? They had a very niche focus and was always true to that niche. I think those things become very, very interesting in terms of people who are purchasing these type of products, which is folks like Brad, Cal, myself, and others.
Right.
Yeah, I would also add in, think about, it goes back to a little bit what we talked about, technology, yes, also people and process. Like where would you feel like you're ready from a people standpoint in regards to, it goes a little bit back to that operating model and roles and responsibilities and the accountability that people would play. Also thinking about, I think this is something that often gets missed, how complicated is the technology stack area? Is the infrastructure part of it ready? And what about tools? Because one of the things I think that I've learned through my journey and been through it a couple of times in regards to agility, really being able to set up that rigor and getting people to be able to work with some standards and consistency is really, really important, because that gives you a view around that product or that outcome that you're trying to achieve, and making sure that you're doing it in an incremental way and you're learning from it.
No, that's key. I'm going to squeeze in two more questions because they're interesting. Sorry, go ahead, Owen.
Yeah, before going there, I just want to, Todd mentioned something which I think is really interesting and actually extremely important for startups, right? So one thing I observe is, great, they launch a product and it's a great product, right? And then when you probe in and you say, okay, look, I have a development team of, 7, 8 people that I need to work on this thing. They don't have the software engineering tools to allow for it, right? So we live in a world of doing daily builds, continuous integration. The tools tend not to support any of that. And so when you buy a product like that, you're taking a huge step back. It is a huge, and it's interesting, nobody really thinks about that.
That's true.
It's true.
It's good.
It's everything behind the curtain that we got to think about. Totally agree with that. I want to squeeze this one question because this one's kind of hits home for me. Do you guys expect improvements or perhaps transformations in customer experience to be driven by core systems or through capability built around the core systems? Do you see that? I know we're hitting the same topic because it's like, what are you trying to achieve, right? Yeah. But is there anything that leads first with that one for you guys?
I can jump in here because it speaks to me. Hopefully everyone will be satisfied with my response. It depends. And where I'm going with that is, what is the business plan, and where and how as a business are you trying to differentiate yourself? And it could be, depending on that capability, it could be enabled through a native cloud, automation enabled through something like Lambda, or it could be something that comes out of the core system that supports a unique ability to bill a customer. I think it really goes back to, whenever these things get hard, I always say, go back to basics.
Yeah.
What is it that we're trying to achieve? What is the outcome? And what's really our differentiator? That will then drive and really start to set, I think, anyone up for then starting to think really smartly about, okay, how do we apply the right solution and where does it best fit?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would add to it, I think that's probably the most difficult area for core systems to impact. I mean, when you think about it, I've worked in organizations where we had average policy size of $2,500 a premium, and then today ours averages more like $125,000, right? At $2,500, nobody wants to touch it. It's straight through. So what's that customer experience look like? At $125,000 premium, there's going to be some touches, and they want more consultative, right? And so how do you optimize the experience so that the relationship is more consultative? And I think to say that one core system is going to be able to impact both ends of that spectrum is hard. And so how do they, like Todd said, how do they set themselves up so they enable some capabilities that then you can stitch together to most appropriately address the user experience that your users expect, right?
No, that's great.
Yeah,
and I know we're out of time. I'm sorry, we're out of time. But I have to say thank you guys. You guys are an amazing panel. I'm honored to be facilitating you guys. And so thank you. There's more questions coming in from different folks. I'm sure they'll chat to you later. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Tony?
Thanks.
Thank you, Brad, Owen, Todd, and Roy, for a super thoughtful discussion, sharing different ways you're all thinking about core systems implementation and upgrades. I mean, we've had a lot of different core systems panels over the years, but I think this one takes the first prize. So thank you all. So now for a quick informational break. At 3 p.m. Eastern, in about an hour, we'll open up the networking. A couple of things I want to bring to your attention. First, go to the top right corner of your screen and update your profile. You can do that right now. Add your name, company, and picture if you can. It will help during networking so people know who they're talking to, and you can do this right now. Second, we're going to engage in a structured speed networking event. How it works is very easy. Every 10 minutes, we're going to shuffle the table so you get to talk to different people. You'll get to basically talk to 6 different groups of people today because it'll be 10 minutes for 6 sessions for 1 full hour. Finally, last tip, stay for networking. Presentations has been awesome. It will be awesome for the next hour, but stay until 3 p.m. and then engage in this great networking, and you'll get to meet some really great people. And I believe some of the speakers will be networking as well, so you get to talk to them. All right, so now let's get back to our speakers. Next speaker is Emilio Figueroa. Figueroa. I think I botched that, Emilio, sorry.
No problem.
He's a chief insurance officer at Foresight. He has led the creation of several insurance firms spanning across MGAs, captives, and alternative risk transfer vehicles from company formation to growth stage. David Gris will engage with Emilio in a fireside chat. David is the co-founder of InsurTech Advice. He previously served as the innovation director at SDIA and led product for Zero, a loss control InsurTech acquired by Everest. Some of you may know how larger legacy insurers may choose a core system vendor. But if you're interested in learning how a younger digital MGA, without the many restrictions a big carrier may have to go through, goes about choosing a core system vendor, you'll have to listen to this fireside chat with Emilio. Well, David, fire away.
Tony, thanks for the kind introduction of Emilio. Really looking forward to having this chat because I think that for MGAs, one of the most important things beyond getting licensed is what is the core technology that you're actually going to be running so you're able to get your policies created. So Emilio, I think there's really 2 areas I want to chat with you today about. One is the design elements for Foresight, and then how you align technology with that to really make sure that it worked. So really jumping into it, not everyone here knows about Foresight or its sister company SafeSight. So it would be great if you could tell us what's unique about Foresight and what underwriting or data advantages do you have to best price workers' comp risk?
Absolutely. How you doing, David? Good to see you, Tony. Hi. So Foresight Risk is an MGU, a true MGU. That's in my eyes, a true InsurTech. So we have a sister company called SafeSight. SafeSight provides a risk management platform. They've been around for about 6 years, have 5,000 plus clients nationwide, dealing with large clients on a SaaS model. I came in about 4.5 years ago, looked at the technology, looked at being able to integrate that technology within the commercial insurance ecosystem, and we looked at workers' comp initially, first and foremost. So we created Foresight as the insurance vehicle to bring that technology into the marketplace. For us, looking at the foundational technology, creating an insurance program around that technology, in my eyes, is a true InsurTech, being able to come to market with a mandatory technology that needs to be used to engage the insured and the employees to mitigate and change their risk management strategies. So looking at, going into the core systems, looking at, how are we going to use the core system? How are we going to do underwriting with this? We're a true middle market player. So we're looking at accounts that are on average 175 to 350,000 in premium. Our filed premiums are at 25,000, depending on the state. Some states are going to be a little more. Some states are going to be a lot more for minimums. The goal is to push this initiative national. or nationally as we grow the program. But looking at the core system that can be agile enough to work with us, with the respective domiciles or the respective regulators in the respective states, to make sure that we can, come to market as fast as possible. Then looking at, underwriting obviously being the core driving motivator behind a core system, and being able to use data points to ease your underwriters' pain points. So we're looking at data providers, looking at what our data providers can provide to us, and then to us bring those data points into the core system via APIs, being able to quote something within seconds and turn a quote out for the underwriter so they can release it, or underwrite it and then release the quote. So for us, the first and foremost is agility, being able to have and to change as a tech firm, being able to have a provider that can provide those services that we require and that we're accustomed to using.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful to get that background in your role as an MGU. But I want to drill into one of the things that you mentioned with your sister company, SafeSite, and you talked about having the right APIs. What is some of the data that you're collecting from SafeSite, and how does that interact with your MGU?
So the data that we're collecting from SafeSite, we're not collecting granular data from our risk management technology. We're looking at the risk score. So we have a patent on our risk score. Our risk score grades an insured based on engagement, but we do it on a very granular basis. We can go down to the individual employee. We can go to a job site. We can go to a specific location. We can go to a specific region, state, national, etc. So we can break it out as we see fit. But we do grade each individual with an A through D score. So obviously A is the better score, D is below OSHA compliance. So we look at that grading and we try to make sure that the clients are engaged. By having that engagement, our goal is to minimize the frequency of claims. We have an actuarial study done by Perennial that shows through the engagement, we can decrease the frequency of workers' comp claims by up to 57% by that engagement. So obviously having clients that are going to be using that. On the underwriting side, so we look at that on the underwriting side, but we can't file rates based on our algorithm for the risk score. So we underwrite on a traditional basis. We look at an insured, we look at their operations, but we delve a lot deeper than your average underwriter. So for us, if it's a construction risk, one of the verticals that we push is we have data providers that will provide permits. So we look at permits that they filed within the city. And all permits are filed within the city, and then they go to the next city. And as they grow and depending on their size, we'll pull permits to see that for a contractor to make sure that they are doing what they said they're doing. If it's a framing contractor and we see a permit filed for roofing, well, that's a concern. So for us, looking at that, looking at the job size, the job cost, the job length, looking at the actual type of permit that they pulled, and bringing those data points to underwriters. Underwriters before used to have to go to the city and get those individual data points. We have data providers that can provide that for us. Now we've built that with them.
So given the robustness of how you do your underwriting, and although you can't quite use the risk scores, how do you see yourself in the continuum from almost carrier to some of the InsurTechs that are coming out that are just purely brokers that want to have some level of share in the risk process? And how does that kind of tie into your relationship with Transverse, your fronting carrier?
Yeah. So if you look at, we don't have any competitors in our space that are doing what we're doing. If you look at, your other competitors that are out there that are writing accounts under $50,000 in premium, they're using data points for quick underwriting, and these are smaller policies. You're talking $1,500 to $7,500 in premium and below policies. We're looking at middle market business, true middle market business, using technology to change the risk engagement for that respective client, making sure that they're proactive with the risk mitigation strategy. But then once they do have a claim, we're being reactive to that. We're trying to help them. We're trying to ease those pain points and humanize that claims experience for them, more like a captive would.
Okay, no, that makes sense that you kind of handle the whole spectrum. So given that you're also handling claims, how did you optimize your technology stack, or how did you think about it to make sure it was a right fit with the TPAs that you have now and the TPAs you plan to have in the future?
We looked at over 14 core system providers. We delved fairly deeply into them. Took us about 7 months to look at all of them and make a decision of who we're going to choose. And our choice was for agility. For us, looking at the providers that can provide, that have either currently built APIs with TPAs or specific TPAs that we're using, and or looking at that core system to make sure that they're agile enough to be able to do it, or have partnerships with specific consulting firms like EY or Deloitte or whoever that know their system and can help integrate what we want to do on a timely manner.
I see. And in terms of when you have those integrations, naturally TPAs are the end of the cycle, but what are some of the things that you think about at that claim and the relationship that you have, so when the claims ultimately happen, you're able to take that data back and bring it back to underwriting to keep your renewals?
So what we do that differentiates us from most, I would say 99% of the legacy carriers, or 95% of the legacy carriers, is we have high cost of acquisition. We all do. So it takes a lot to acquire an insured. Once we acquire that insured through our broker distribution partners, maintaining that insured and maintaining retention is always tough if you can't be proactive when a claim happens. So for us, looking at minimizing that, maximizing that engagement, minimizing the expenditures, making sure that the indemnity payments are low by engaging that employee, engaging the insured. We talk to every insured on a weekly basis to make sure that they know where their employee stands with the claim, when they're returning to work. We talk to the employee, making sure that they're okay, making sure whatever needs are needed to simplify that engagement and to lower those indemnity expenditures are done. From there, what are we doing to on the technology side to it? We're looking at digitizing our first notice of loss, simplifying it with our SafeSite technology. So once they have a claim, they can press a button, they'll be connected to nurse triage, or if it's not an urgent claim at first aid, they need to get a Band-Aid, they can go to a local clinic. We'll tell them where the nearest clinic that's part of the medical provider network is, and we can send them that way.
That makes sense. So as you collect all of this data, naturally, you have to share it with your fronting carrier and reinsurance partners. So what are some of the things that you think about in terms of analytics that you gather, or ways that you aggregate that information to be as useful as possible to your partners?
So for our carrier partners, so for transfers, we love the relationship we have with them. We're very transparent. We're very open. They're very agile. They're quick to move into whatever market we want to go into. We share any and all data. So we have a full data lake that we have with our core system provider that they have full access to, and we push all the data points are sent into the core system from the TPAs, from our vendors, from our data vendors, from you name it. Everything's put into a data lake. That data lake is then pushed to our carrier partners so they could see what we're doing, how we're underwriting, and we're both partners. We're taking a quota share in the program. So for us, we're looking at making sure that not only are we being successful and we're being profitable on it, but that our carrier partner is as well. We value our fronting relationships to the utmost.
So final question. Some of the people in the audience today are kind of sitting in your shoes when you started the MGA, and they're going down the journey to find the right core system and also the right data partners for integration. What do you think is a single kind of piece of advice you have for them that they can take through as they go through this process?
In choosing a core system provider, make sure that they're agile, make sure that they're quick, especially for InsurTech. So you don't have much time to get into the market. You need to be first to market. Choose the right provider. Take your time in looking at everyone that's out in the industry, making sure that they're writing your type of line of business, making sure that they have experience doing it. Talk to the team members that are going to be implementing them, or implementing your stack into the system. Making sure that APIs are available for your current providers, for your current vendors. Making sure that there's, if they don't have a built relationship with a specific carrier, making sure that you can provide those API junctions that your carrier partner will need for the data lake in advance to signing any contract. Look at the pricing, compare the pricing, be tough on pricing. There's a lot of things you have to look at, but take your time when you do this.
Thanks, Emilio. Really glad that you could join us and share the digital MGA perspective on core systems. And I will hand it back to Tony, who will introduce our next panelists.
David, thank you. Tony, much appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Emilio, for sharing the details on how a startup insurer may go through in selecting the very important core systems vendor. Next is our final panel. The panel will be on the topic of reducing claim cycle times through automation, which, if you're in claims, I'm sure is something you think about quite often. Let me introduce the speakers. First is Teresa Urban, is the VP of Claims at Palomar. Throughout her career, Teresa has consistently been an agent of change, improving processes and improving new technology. She also has held senior roles at CAC, Rhino, and National General. Kevin is a senior manager in the insurance group at EY. Kevin's expertise lies in claims operational improvements and driving long-term business value from claims. He has also held operations role in claims at Liberty. David is the managing director of the commercial practice of Level. He has over 15 years experience as an executive within enterprise consultancies and early-stage SaaS companies. And the panel will be moderated by Heisberg Fox, who is the insurance industry leader of EMEA and APAC at Appian. He has focused his career as a bridge between business and IT in companies such as EXIM, Partner Re, and Hiscox. Panel's yours, Heisberg.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, and welcome everybody for the second panel. We're going to talk about reducing claim cycle times with process automation. And yeah, we want to focus on three themes, really. Drivers of long cycle times in claims, state of automation today, and yeah, the shortcuts that are there to faster claims. And we've got a fantastic panel and some material to go through to cover this properly. But if you have questions, then please raise them on the side, and we look at the end if we have time to answer them. If not, then we can answer them probably in the networking event, which I advise you to join. Well, first, let's kick it off. And Teresa, maybe you want to help me here. I mean, we're talking about drivers to long cycle times in claims, but let's set the stage. Maybe you can do that for us with what's the standard cycle time that we're talking about for a commercial claim, for example?
Well, I would say that for our commercial claims and really any claim, severity is actually the driver for your cycle time. So if you have a claim that is low severity, you can probably settle the claim much quicker than you can high severity. I think an average claim cycle, not so much for commercial, but maybe personal, would be about 11 days if it's straightforward. With commercial claims, obviously there may be additional factors. And as you know, the longer the claim is open, the more it costs for the insurance company. So insurance carriers are very focused on trying to proactively settle claims. And we want to settle claims for what we owe. So in the commercial space, you may have additional time because you have to have experts that go out and evaluate the damages, make sure that the damages actually are related to the loss and not pre-existing, or a wear and tear or anything that may or may not be included on the policy. So I think it would depend. And then, we're heavily regulated too. So timing is also, not on the side of the insurance company because we have regulations on how long we have to settle claims. Most would surely be settled within the first 30 to 60 days, depending on the information that we're able to gather immediately.
Yeah, no, and we'll dive into the complications of the process if you involve loss adjusters and what that means. And in terms of a catastrophe claim, for example, like a wildfire, would that change that timeline, or is that not relevant?
It definitely could change the timeline depending on if we're able to get to the affected area, if it's safe enough, what the resources are. Sometimes you have resource constraints when there's a catastrophe because there's not enough feet on the ground, or there's not enough resources or adjusters to get out and assess the damages. So that absolutely could take longer, just depending on the type of disaster or catastrophe that you're faced with.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for that, Teresa. And Kevin, I mean, you've got also quite a lot of experience in handling claims. Do you believe there's a variance in claim cycle times between claims processed by independent adjusters or internal adjusters? Do you see that differentiation?
Yeah, I would say broadly yes, but to Teresa's point, when we're comparing internal versus independent adjusters, you have to assume it's the same type of claim severity, right? But broadly, yes, we do see in our experience working with our clients longer cycle times with independent adjusters. But there really are a lot of variables that can impact and drive that really across people, process, and obviously, of course, technology.
Yeah.
One of the things that we see is just one from an independent adjuster, the level of information, right, that they have available to them. Sometimes we see where they don't have the same information, especially when they're not provided full system access. We have some clients where they provide full access to their technology, to their independence, obviously with enough rules to prevent them from navigating outside of what they need. But even in that case, you have an independent adjuster who's working with multiple clients, so they're not going to be nearly as efficient navigating that system as an internal adjuster would be. And kind of to build upon that is, even when you take the system component out of it, they're managing claim handling standards that could vary across client that they work with. So that internal adjuster is going to be really well versed on what the standards are, how to get the claim handled, while the independent adjuster, kind of, I don't want to say struggle, but it's not second nature to them.
Yeah. No, thanks for that, Kevin. And yeah, it's we need to do a fair comparison, right? And we see also we have customers that want to work with independent adjusters, but the challenge is like how to give them the tools and the data to handle that properly. So yeah, I see your point. And David, welcome as well. I mean, how we talked a bit about technology here, but how do you compare that? Like how important is technology behind the adjuster versus actually the actual business process, like the end-to-end process in terms of getting the information, gain approvals, handle subrogation? How do you compare that?
I'll give the the benefit of coming from a consulting firm. I guess Kevin has this benefit too. Is that I just say both are important, and we can start with that, right? Yeah. I don't think there's one answer to that question, but I definitely think that when you look at technology and where it plays in, a couple of things always jump to mind if I think about how we work with our customers. At the kind of least sexy option, right? Reducing friction at the end of the day is always going to be the thing that's most important. And that's not always the thing that is, maybe most tangible, or at least, when people are starting to invest on that side, it might not be the thing that jumps out at first, but the ability to kind of, whether it's adding functionality that's going to reduce that friction, or whether it's even just subtracting in some cases, right? As a way of smoothing things out. Super important, and has a big role in all of the stakeholders' ability to get more out of what it is that they're building. So that's one piece of it, and again, that's kind of the part that's maybe less sexy, less forward-facing. Kevin mentioned this a minute ago from a just kind of accessibility standpoint, but data is probably the thing though that becomes most exponential, and so we can talk about accuracy of data, availability of it, and the ability to do something with it. But I think if the question of why is tech important in this versus maybe the more procedural side of things, if you get the data right, and this is a funny thing to say, but if it's more right than it used to be, that has a lot of really big time benefits, right? And so that's kind of that middle piece of you get the data right, and it can really do a lot of things. But to touch on like that process piece really quickly, I would say if in being able to say both and to that, I do think that we're talking about processes that are historically very human. And so I do think that alignment at the end of the day between whatever functionality or capability you can spit out and how that improves kind of human to human at the end of the day, at least from a field perspective and expectation perspective for the insured, is super meaningful. And so keeping that stuff aligned is important, and that's less of a tech thing, and it's more of a just make sure that you're not getting away from where people's heads are when they enter into that process.
Yeah. No, and I think there's a lot of tools in the market, a lot of technology that go hand in hand with a review of the process, right? And but there's also a risk to it. I think there's also tools in the market to make a bad process very automated.
Very much so.
I think you have to put it all together to see how you want to organize that. So yeah, maybe we come back to that a little bit later. Kevin, if I can talk to you a bit more about automation, like I mean, you're working for EY, and you've got a lot of customers that probably use workflow or process automation. What proportion of them of your customers uses that in the claims processes end to end?
Yeah, great question. So I would say almost every carrier we work with has if they have somewhat of a modern claim system, right, they have some level of automation, but you know, automation obviously varies greatly. And you know, I'd say think about it two different groups: those focusing on process automation, and then others moving more towards decision automation. Right, and with process automation is obviously a little more common. We seeing things like automated assignment, document generation, automated payments, automation throughout the workflow to move claims throughout the operation. I'd ballpark and say over 90% of the clients we work with are leveraging some form of process automation. But decision automation is really where we see a lot of our clients moving to, and that's what everyone's talking about and is striving for, is a straight through processing of claims, for that full or low touch experience. And there's lower adoption there. Obviously, it's more complex, but with more complexity, there's greater upside. And things that would fall under the umbrella of decision automation would be, fully automating the claims process, claims investigation, claims evaluations, and even quality assurance. Right, quality assurance has been something that's been identified, and we're working with clients on of how do I automate the element of claims QA that is process related. Did we do this timely? Did we do this activity? Automate that and then generate real-time, more targeted qualitative assessments, and ultimately even using data, as David mentioned earlier, to automate or inform the QA process when it comes to assessing whether you met standards. So automation is definitely on top of mind for everyone, and I think there's just varying degrees to what different clients are moving towards.
Yeah, you gave a lot of options for them how to tackle that, but what's preventing for that number to, let's focus on the true end-to-end claims handling and touchless claims that a lot of people talk about. What's preventing that number to be higher? Or what are the main stumbling blocks?
Yeah, so there's a few that come to mind. One overall is just the solutions in the market aren't as developed, to fit that versus what I mentioned around process automation. So we see more and more solutions every day, but it's just the process automation solutions have been around longer and more developed. We do see an overall a little bit of a hesitancy in automating those claims decisions because there's a big risk, right? All the efficiency savings that you gain from straight through processing, if you don't do it right, can quickly be cannibalized if you start paying claims that you normally wouldn't, right? So claims leakage avoidance, big focus. So you want to get it right. Sometimes it's taking a little slow to make sure you get it right. And then there's other external factors. So depending on the line of business, your customer demands are limited, or in some cases slower than expected adoption of the digital claims model really creates some challenges, because to have that full straight through process experience, you need to know and be confident that what your customer wants, and you're able to deliver not so much an omni-channel experience, but that omni-channel experience. Some want a fully automated claim, others want limited involvement, others might want a lot of human involvement. So it's a balancing act, and being able to gather the capabilities where you can be confident in what your customer wants, and you're able to give them the experience they want, and then also have the capabilities to make those decisions. And then the last piece that's external is just overall regulatory risk. The analytical models that are needed to create this straight-through process journey are going to be subject to increased scrutiny from regulators. Because they could have that unintended impact. So those are some of the challenges that we're seeing out there.
Yeah, often the last one is forgotten by the outside world, right? We are heavily regulated, and also what we see at our customers is that the claims data, and we talked about data, are not on one system, but in many systems. And if you think from a customer, you are actually touching other systems as well, like policy system, document management system, and to tackle that true end-to-end processing, that is key. And Teresa, can I ask you also about the automation? I mean, how do you consider the claim automation maturity today? To zoom out a little bit on that topic.
Well, I would agree with Kevin. And from a claims adjustment perspective, I think you can automate the transactional or the processes, but the decision point or the judgment that you need from a human expert, I just don't think you can automate those as much, because then you'll just have automation on top of a manual process, because they'll have so many exceptions in the exception reports, because there was something like a luxury vehicle that we decided to repair, but it was one panel, and the repair, the equipment that it takes to repair that vehicle, exceeds the amount of the vehicle, even if we repair it. So you're paying more than you owe on a claim. Because again, the main thing that we want to do is we want to pay claims that we owe, but we don't want to overpay. And so you do so much automation, and then you're going back and fixing what you tried to, do a straight through process. And so I think, just from my experience, you're always going to have a bit of human interaction when you adjust claims. You're never going to be able to replace 30 years of experience from a field adjuster who can go out to the scene and say, hey, this damage on this stucco is actually from wear and tear. This doesn't have anything to do with the storm. And if we were just to look at it from, let's say, an AI that came out and took the picture, and we said, oh, that's totaled, that's a totaled building, and you've paid twice as much as you are supposed to pay because they didn't have the expertise in there. Because you can apply logic to automation, but then there are some things in claims that you just can't apply logic to. There are going to be those outliers.
Yeah, so it's more like keeping the human in the loop, huh? As you say.
I mean, you're going to have to. There's no way to automate this fully and to be profitable, in my opinion. I think because you're going to pay for that core system, you're going to pay for the maintenance on that, and then you're going to pay somebody to go back and fix what they couldn't do, because you have those outliers, and your exceptions are going to be too great.
Yeah, and those are the biggest challenges that you see, basically.
I mean, yeah, I think that you can definitely apply, automation to what we know will happen. I mean, we know first notice of loss, we know timely payments, we know things like processes when you picked up the assignment, when you assigned it out. I mean, we know all of these things that we can apply logic to, but there are those certain issues that you actually need an expert on. And luckily we still have those field adjusters and desk adjusters who have a ton of experience and love this field, even with the tech that's coming in.
Yeah, and what we said earlier, you can also enhance their job by giving them the right information and use them to the full extent, right?
Absolutely.
Send it back, and that the process doesn't break down when you use them, and that it's all part of the same ecosystem. I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, I think to relieve them of so many keystrokes and make sure that they don't have to, enter data, twice. And so I think that's the other part, is we have to remember that we have an internal customer, and then our external customer, for their experience, was exactly what they expected it to be when they needed us. Yeah, no, indeed. And what I also always say, like touchless claims, for that reason that you just explained, I think is a bit difficult term. Claim segmentation is probably the better term to apply in an organization, to say these things can be automated, and these need a human element, or a junior can look at, or that the senior needs to look at that. Yeah. Right. And David, can I get your view on? I mean, do you think there are some benchmarks that can be used for the maturity of claims process automation
that you see?
Yeah, I'll, excuse me. I'll answer that, I guess, at first, especially coming from the technical side. I think one of the interesting things about the term automation is that it gets very technical very quickly with some people when you start talking about benchmarks. You know, even in the super nerdy world, when you talk about code coverage and things like this, right? People sometimes look at automation as this, okay, we're going to see how many boxes we can light up with an A, and if we get all the boxes, then we're probably good, right? Or if we get 75% of those boxes, we're good. And the irony of that, right, is that you actually move away from key business metrics, which we all know are valid and important, and you get into stuff that's frankly too technical. And it's funny for me to say that coming from my position, but I think very much so when you talk about effectiveness and benchmarking, it really comes back to still some of those core business metrics, right? Teresa talked a little bit about, you know, exceptions and knowing that some of these things are going to end up in the hand of a human. So just basic business process optimization still ranks, right? Basic financials around, okay, great, we might have gotten, you know, most of these steps automated, but we actually made our payout situation worse because we just doubled down on the really dumb stuff we do, right? And so a lot of times it's getting back to some of those basics, even with the technology doing the automation, that's still super important. The one thing I will say though, and Kevin kind of hit on this earlier, I think when you look at where you can benchmark and get fairly quantitative, even from kind of a technical perspective, you know, there is the process automation side of things and looking at, you know, going back and doing some quantitative analysis on that. But on that decision framework or decision front, right, when you talk about things like audit decisions, escalation approvals, there are solid ways, and obviously we don't have the time to get into all those in this conversation, but there are definitely some solid ways to at least dig into some of that quantitatively and say, okay, for these things that we know that we can kind of go left and right on, how often, what percentage of the time are we making the right decision? Can we QA that a little bit, you know, et cetera? So I don't want to make it sound like the tech isn't important, but sometimes it helps to fall back on just key business metrics as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for that perspective, David. And we talked a bit about the, you know, the challenges that we face and what the state of the automation is, and let's talk a bit about what we can do, right? How we can shortcut faster claims, the shortcut to faster claims rather. And David, coming back to you, what can you share a bit of what are key considerations carriers should use in making a build versus buy decision?
Yeah, I mean, I'll play off of the same theme that I kind of just hit on, which is, you know, start with the non-technical piece of this, right? Which is understand the problems that you're trying to solve. Not all carriers are trying to solve the same problems, and frankly, not everybody has the same holes and the same strong points. And so I think starting with what are the actual business problems that you're trying to solve, right? Is it an accuracy problem? Are things building up, et cetera? There are different, frankly, like there are different paths there to take, and that's definitely going to dictate some of the solutions that make the most sense. The thing that we generally have our customers layer on once we've established that, and you know, step A is pretty easy, is to really focus on those customer journeys, right? And to truly identify what do those journeys look like? Where are we trying to find gains? So yes, we want to fix these business problems. How do you apply those to actual customer journeys? And frankly, how do you start to kind of 80-20 some of that stuff so that you're spending the right time in the right place? Once you've got that done, and you've got those processes kind of identified and you have those journeys pulled out that seem like they're the most important, then I think it becomes a question of, from an implementation standpoint and from a, let's say, longer term standpoint, do you, whether it's build versus buy, do you have the ability to iterate on the solution that you choose? So if you're going to take something out of the box, great, but is that going to set you back a year and a half before you can get your first piece of functionality out there? If so, think about what that means to where you are now. So it's not just about end state, it's also about, can you start to knock out some of those higher priority journeys more quickly? Do you have a tool, either in-house or otherwise, that's going to allow you to do that? Or can you maybe stitch some stuff together more quickly? And you know, I would say finally, and this was kind of touched on earlier as well, but think about what it means to design for flexibility in the future. One of the benefits of automation, and especially when you get into the process conversation, and I know at Appian, you know this well, right? But it's this question of not just, okay, can we automate what we have today, but what if the rules change a little bit? And I'm not talking about regulatory rules, although that's important, but what if our business rules change? Do we have the ability to use this system or this platform that we've just invested in or built and actually change with it? And so I think, you know, keeping those things in mind, again, these are all great conversations that we can spend lots of time on, but at the highest level, I think those are kind of just the no-brainer. Think about this stuff before you jump in.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, David. It's indeed like remaining agile is what we hear from a lot of our customers, and you know, not create new legacy,
100%,
or add to the spaghetti that we already have. Yeah, no, and Teresa, maybe you can give your review as well, like also more from a people aspect, right? Some field adjusters are perhaps, and maybe internal, external, are a bit less tech savvy, if I may say that, than other parts of the organization. How do you incorporate the appropriate training and upgrades to the claims process, and who do you think is responsible for that in the organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, the field adjusters are very important. You know, the heartbeat for what we do, especially where I am currently, is you know, many of them have to, you know, be out multiple times to areas to view the damages. So what you don't want them to do is to have their biggest challenge to be the system and how they upload the documents or how they communicate their findings. And like somebody said earlier, a lot of the field adjusters, if they're independents, they work for multiple carriers. So they're not always in one system. So they're not really a subject matter expert of just one system always. They're kind of a jack of trade, master of none, if I can say that. But I think it's important for the carriers to make sure that whoever they've, you know, hired to do the field work is that they understand how then to get the documents in. They understand how to communicate their findings. And I think it's important to keep them in mind when, you know, when you say that they're less tech savvy, they may be, you know, less tech savvy in one way, but, you know, they're relationship managers. They're doing a lot of things, keeping up with the nuances of the claims and the resources. So we have to make that, you know, at least the ease of use has to be there. So I think the carrier is responsible for that. You know, as hard as that is for me to say, being at a carrier, I think it's our responsibility to train the field.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And there's also different ways of developing solutions, right? I mean, in the old days, we used to have like this V model of business requirements, and then 6 months later, you would see something if you're lucky. Yeah. And now you are able to design things with them, right? Like you can also involve them in the design and the development of it, and they can participate in that. That's what we see at our customers, at least. And yeah, I totally agree with you. The technology needs to serve them, right? Because you hire them, and you want to make good use of them. They're experts. So yeah, absolutely. And Kevin, if I can spin it to you. A bit of an ethical question, actually, because there's always been a bit of a tension in some insurers to say, okay, pay claims slower or hold back because we need to optimize our investable premium versus process something fast and pay out fast. And you know, so how do carriers make the case internally that shorter claim cycles are better? How do you talk to your customers about that?
Yeah, so I think the first step is one, you know, just making it clear that the goal is never to pay less, right? It's always to pay what you owe, nothing more, nothing less. Because underpayment is ultimately, well, yeah, financially that might look good on a report, but you know, when it comes to customer retention, if the claim experience is going to have a huge impact on customer retention. So if you shortchange your customers and underpay, it can be even worse than overpaying a claim slightly. So it's really making sure it's more about payment accuracy versus minimizing payments. And then when you're thinking about, you know, cycle times, what we always recommend is take a look at it and how does it impact like the the 4 areas that we typically focus on when it comes to a claims operation, the decisions to be made is, and David brought up the customer before. So customer experience, fast is good, but fast and easy is better. Customer experience. So, quicker payments allow settlements, let customers move on, reestablish, move on with their life. And we know customers do want that shorter experience, but also it does increase the brand attractiveness to your, more tech savvy customers if they have that nice straight through process, digital, largely automated experience. Then you have your internal efficiency, and that's obvious. That's a pretty obvious one with automation, right? Opportunity to maybe optimize your workforce, but there's direct impact on claims costs there, right? Quicker payments when we're talking about auto could lead to less storage costs, less rental cost, and greater efficiencies by being able to apply your experienced staff to the more complex claims, reduce phone volume. So there's obviously a big efficiency play with shorter cycle times. And then payment accuracy. So, the big thing with the shorter cycle times on claims is avoiding litigation. So we know litigation is a big driver of claim severity, and especially everything that, we're seeing in the courts with social inflation. The faster you can complete an investigation, potentially get an early settlement, leads to less attorney involvement, and that reduces litigation. So that can really help impact, your bottom line when it comes from a overall severity and loss cost standpoint. And the last, element that I think is forgotten quite often is around the employee experience. So we know in claims there has been a long, shortage of talent. It is very difficult to attract and retain claims talent from many organizations. We're seeing that more with our clients now in the post-COVID world, where there's an element of free agency of, well, I'm not tied to go work for, the carrier down the street. I could go work anywhere because I can work remotely. So ultimately, short cycle times, largely driven by automation and the use of analytics, makes your claim organization a more attractive place to work. And the carriers who win that battle for attracting and retaining claims talent really going to have a strategic advantage over others. So those are just some ways to think about, that internal selling it internally around why shorter cycle times can be better for the organization.
Yeah, no, thanks, Kevin. And I like that user experience as well. I mean, it's coming back to what Teresa said also about field adjusters, right? It's also internally for claims handlers. If you have a very experienced person that with a law degree that can handle liability claims, you want them to be working efficiently, right? And so that's a very good point. And I think you touched also on everything that you mentioned is a part of the claims cost. So everything you save on there is straight bottom line profit, right? And it's not just the claims payment that you do; it's also the processing cost that is part of that. So, anybody else wants to comment on that topic? If not, then can I? I'd like you to, could you give a piece of advice to the audience on how to make a meaningful difference in adding automation to their claims process? Somebody wants to go first?
I was going to say, I'll jump in if no one else will. I will. I'll hammer on the same broken record because sometimes in these it's good to at least stick with a couple points. But there are so many ways, obviously, to make significant improvements on this topic, at the carrier level. But I do think that if you're looking for a solid way to sanity check what it is that you're doing, if you are improving data accuracy and/or visibility, or you are making a tangible impact on the end customer such that you can speak to it and kind of point out exactly where that's happening and why it's significant. If you're doing either of those things or both, that's probably a good place to start. Other ways to get really good, but at the end of the day, for folks that are kind of looking for big bang, or I should say, best value time and effort and money spent, I think those are two good places to start evaluating, which processes are best attacked, and frankly, from a tooling standpoint and from a build versus buy standpoint, where that fits. So I'll leave it.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to add one more thing. I just think when you're looking at technology or, changing your technology, I think it's important to not be short-sighted, but also make sure that the company that you're selecting does have a nice niche and they know how to solve what you're asking for. I've worked in a few companies where we did some system integrations, and then we had to change systems within 2 years from implementing the first one. So I think it's important that you know exactly what the path of the company is before you sign up with with the company that you're going to use for your automation. I hate to be the pessimist on this panel, and clearly I don't sell technology, but I do handle claims, and I have cleaned up a ton of data because of automation that wasn't right for the company who purchased it. So I think that's important for you to understand the direction that you're going and the direction that that company is also going.
And are you then referring to the system integrator or the system provider, or both?
I would say all of it.
Yeah, all of it, the whole project.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, good point. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll be a little bit optimistic, right? And think a little bit further long term. So assume you're successful, right, in automating, driving a lot of automation within your claims process, but then really planning ahead to what's next, and kind of touch on what I brought up earlier around talent. I feel like that's something that gets forgotten. So if you think, automation will eventually eliminate the first few level of adjusters, how are you going to handle that as an organization, and be able to replace mid-level and senior adjusters? So anyone who's been in a claims operation knows that traditional model is you come in, you learn on the lower severity claims, and then you move up the ranks. But when those claims aren't there to act as a training, right, area and a feeding ground for your more complex claims that are still going to require that human touch, what's the strategy there? What types of tools are you going to need to support them? Because you're going to have someone maybe who's coming in a little more green, doesn't have the 15 years of industry experience, and now they got a complex claim that they're going to need to handle. So it's just tying automation efforts to the people impact from a talent perspective. I think that's a good way to think about automation holistically, and the impact it will have on the claims process and the operation.
Yeah, no, that's great. So just to summarize, like what I heard is, support the good people that you have in your organization, keeping the human in the loop. Also what Teresa said about for field adjusters, but also internally, have good data, get the right experts in, choose the right teams in terms of systems and SI people, but ensure that you keep agility in your systems, and do the automation together with your people, right? Support them. So that's great. Thanks for that, and thanks for your insights in this panel.
Yeah,
it was great.
Heisper,
hand over to you, Tony.
Yeah, Heisper. Actually, there are a couple questions for the audience.
All right.
Yeah, if you want to check the general chat, there are a couple questions there. So,
what the first one maybe is what you will recommend to concentrate on for the startups that build core systems for insurance companies.
Oh, actually, that was from the previous panel. So actually, let me read the one from Micah. So how has increased 10 valuations on vehicles and buildings affected automated claims? Some used cars are worth 5 to 10K more than Kelley Blue Book, and homes may cost 100K more to repair right now. Anyone to take?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So that's a great question, right? So one is obviously the underlying analytical models need to take those changes into effect when determining whether or not the claim qualifies for straight through processing. But most of our clients are using estimating services for the ACV. That also takes into account recent sales in the area. So the bit of inflation when it comes to vehicle value is covered there. But then also you have the salvage values are raising. So with auto, the total loss decision, one of the most important decisions claims adjuster can make, it's making sure that you're using up-to-date data around what can we really get for this vehicle from a salvage return standpoint. And we've worked with some clients who weren't really maximizing, that information, and they were totaling vehicle or not totaling vehicles that, traditionally it was a repair, but considering what you can get from a salvage standpoint, maybe totaling it is the right decision.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And then I'll just wrap it up, Heiser. There's one more question here. It's from Alexandre, and this is to Teresa. Would you agree the vast majority of claims adjustment could be automated, and that AI can forward a human what he can't figure out? Even that happens this way, would you agree it can help save a lot of costs spent to analyze and process claims?
I would say on the low severity claims, there are claims that are straight through processing that can definitely be automated. I mean, you may have a one vehicle accident, one side of the vehicle is damaged. You can put the valuation in there and see what the repairs would be. They can make that payment and be done with it. If there's a supplemental payment that comes in, yeah, we can work on that and pay the supplemental payment. So I think the low severity claims can definitely just be processed. And I've had quite a few employees that were just processors with basically no adjusting experience because the system does most of it for them. So yes, I would say that. On the high severity claims, I would say be careful of doing that, because there is caution when you're looking at a claim that's going to be a run-of-the-mill claim, but it's not, it's an outlier. And so I think that you may see some litigation that may come up if in fact claims are handled one way, and yet there are anomalies that should have been considered when the claim's adjusting or the adjudication of the claim. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question. If not, we can talk in panel later.
Yes, thank you,
If I may
Teresa.
say something on that, what we see is that AI you can also see as augmented information, right? So you can use that technology to analyze the information and support the claims handler. So you don't have to always fully automate it.
That's true. No, that's true. You can use it as a tool, and it has been a really good tool for, let's say the bird's eye view of a home or a building for the roof damages. You can use that, and it's a great tool to use. That's true. Thank you for saying that.
Great. Thank you, Teresa. And Heiser, I sorry to interject here at the end, but wrapping up, so feel free to wrap up or share last.
I think we wrapped it up. We had a great discussion. So we touched on process elements, the automation elements in terms of technology, but also on the people side of it. And I think those are the key components in making this happen, I think. So thanks all for your input.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you, Heiser, Teresa. Sorry, I mispronounced your name, Teresa, Kevin, and David, for an exciting discussion on claims automation and all the things you need to consider to make it work. I was very, very informative, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So I will share my screen now for the final time. For sticking around. Obviously the presentation was awesome, but networking is also going to be great. So I want to share with you how it's going to work. So first of all, if you haven't done this already, please go and update your profile. On the top right corner of your screen, you'll see some kind of icon, and then you just have to click on it and add your picture and name and title. And what's going to happen is once we stop the presentation mode, the floor is going to open up, and you're going to be placed in some random table. Just talk to people in the table. You'll be talking to them for 10 minutes. And then after the 10 minutes over, we're going to shuffle the floor. And so you're going to be talking to a different person at a different table. Now, navigation tips, please turn your audio and video on. Without that, you can't really network, obviously. And if you need to go to another table, you can double click and move there. If you have issues, refreshing browser often fixes it. And if you still have issues, find us, anyone with our InsurTech logo, or just put it on the general chat, or you can email us, and we'll try to work with you to fix the problem. So with that, we're going to open up the floor. So brace yourself. You might be like, where the heck am I? But don't worry, just like turn the audio camera on and start chatting and talking to people. And so on behalf of InsurTech, thank you for being a part of this event. Thank you to all the speakers for a great discussion. and presentation. We look forward to seeing you all at the next event. Thank you very much.